Hey, my name is Junggun, and I decided to make a simple guide for top-line wave manipulation. Well, I don't know how simple it actually is, but I want to try and make it understandable to players of all skill levels. I want to preface this by saying that this is how I personally understand the game. Obviously, nobody is perfect, so my idea of certain concepts may be flawed. If anybody has any comments, questions, or critiques, I would love to discuss with them in the comments section. So, now that we got that out of the way, let's get right into it. In my view of the game, there are four wave states, and these would be the neutral lane state, the frozen lane state, a slow pushing lane state, and a fast pushing lane state. We're going to go over all four of these in the video, but first I want to define a few terms I'm going to use throughout the video just in case people don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to use the word pushing to describe the movement of minions in the lane. In any lane where the wave is moving, the minions are either pushing towards you or you are pushing it toward the enemy's side. A crash is when a minion wave is pushed into the enemy turret, and a neutral lane state is when the minions are at the center of the lane with an equal number of minions on both sides. I'm going to start with explaining slow pushing. My definition of a slow push is that a wave with a higher HP value will slowly push towards the opposite side. And what I mean by an HP value is the collective HP of a minion wave. For example, a wave with 7 minions has more HP than a wave with 6 minions, therefore the wave with 7 minions would end up pushing. When the position of the minion wave is skewed to one side, the wave will eventually start pushing to the opposite side in the form of a slow push under natural circumstances. This happens because the turret reduces the HP of one side's minions and the other side has higher HP regen, which is basically to say that their minions reach the fight faster due to the wave being on their side of the map. Also, slow pushes generally consist of 3 or more waves. If it's crashed earlier through human intervention, I would consider it a fast push. Fast push, Jesus. This is why when you're slow pushing, you generally don't want to last hit the minions once you get it pushing. If this doesn't make sense to you right now, don't worry. I'll try to explain it better with an example on the next slide. So, in this example, I've just crashed the wave into the enemy turret. If you take a look at the wave, the red minions have more HP due to my minions being killed by the turret and them getting reinforced faster. This results in a huge wave of red minions building up towards me, and you can later see it crash into my turret since I didn't do anything about it. And I'll speed it up so you guys don't have to sit here for a minute. We can just watch the wave as it pushes into me. You can see it build. And after this wave dies, you're going to get to see it crash, like this. I hope that having a visual aid made what I said make more sense. Now, we're going to talk about why slow pushing is good. The main reason why I believe slow pushing is so important is because of a concept called priority. I define priority as the time minions give you to do other things. To explain this better, let's go back to the example video. As you can see, a huge wave is crashing into my turret. This means that my theoretical enemy laner has priority. I'm stuck here clearing my minions while he can go through other things on the map. This is all that priority really is. With priority, you can get deep wards in the enemy jungle, roam, invade, look for global plays with teleport or certain ultimates, recall, eat honey fruit, or kill a jungle camp. Being able to properly play with priority is a really important concept that even I'm not very good at yet. I recommend practicing it as much as possible and make it a habit to always do things with your priority instead of sitting around and waiting for your wave to come back. Some other good things about slow pushing is that it can give you an advantage in trades due to you having a big wave. Basically, if you fight an enemy champion in a large wave of your own, the minions will do lots of damage to your opponent, and you can even use your minions to block skill shots. If you're strong, you can even use this minion advantage to 2v1 your lane opponent and the jungler if you get ganked. Also, the optimal moment to tower dive is when you crash a slow pushed wave. The big wave makes it easier to dive since it gives you more time to set up the dive. If the dive succeeds, the enemy top laner will lose a big wave to the turret and die. Or, if the enemy sees the dive coming, he'll have to back off of his own turret. Even in this scenario, he still loses the big wave. It's honestly a lose-lose opponent for lose-lose situation for your opponent. Sorry. Now, let's talk about the downsides or potential weaknesses of slow pushing. First, a slow push can be turned into an enemy freeze. We'll talk more about this later, so don't worry about that too much for now. Your slow push will eventually turn into an enemy slow push if you crash the wave, since your minions will eventually be killed by the turret, and the enemy wave will build and push towards you. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, since this is what allows the concept of priority to exist. However, do understand that they are going to get priority on you if they crash their slow pushed wave. Slow pushing can also make you vulnerable to ganks, since it can take a while to crash the wave. And lastly, slow pushing can sometimes give the enemy enough time to get back to lane and collect a big wave when it would have been more punishing to push the lane faster and make them miss some minions rather than none. Next, we're going to talk about freezing. This is probably the most controversial wave state in the game due to there being a lot of discussion on whether or not it's good. I'm going to try my hand at explaining what freezing is and what its strengths and weaknesses are. So, a freeze is when a wave with a higher HP value is deliberately held on your side of the lane. I consider this the least natural wave state since you have to tank and kill minions in order to hold an optimal freeze. You'll see an example of this, so don't worry if it's hard to visualize right now. You can think of freezing as a different outcome of slow pushing as opposed to crashing. In this slide, we're going to be looking at an example of what a freeze might look like. As you can see, the wave is slow pushing towards me, and what I'm going to do is hold the wave on my side of the map by tanking the minions, and then going into the bush to drop aggro when my own minions arrive. Which you'll get to see right when this minion dies. Tanking the minion, and then my minions arrive, and then I go into the bush. Just like that. You also want to kill some of the enemy minions, since you don't want the wave to be too big. If the wave is too big, then you take more damage while taking the minions. This isn't really an optimal freeze by me since I take a little bit too much damage, but I hope you guys get the concept. So, now let's talk about the strengths of freezing. Freezing is good because it's potentially the most punishing wave manipulation technique in the game. When you ask a top laner what their biggest nightmare is, it probably involves some freezing. Since it keeps the wave on your side of the map, the enemy laner has to put themselves in danger to walk up and hit the wave. This can be because you are so much stronger or you froze to set up a gank for your jungler. If you are much stronger than your opponent, you can outright zone them off the wave and make sure they don't have access to any minions. This is why freezing is punishing and can even feel unfair if you don't know what to do about it. If the enemy top laner does know what it takes to break a freeze, he's likely going to call up his jungler and help him push in the wave. This is good because the enemy jungler has to waste his time bailing out one of his teammates, which opens up your team to make plays on the opposite side of the map. Just to make sure you don't die 2v1. So now we're going to talk about the weaknesses of freezing. The biggest weakness of freezing is that it deprives you of priority while giving your opponent priority instead. I said earlier that freezing is the alternate result of slow pushing. Just like with crashing the wave, a freeze can allow the enemy laner to go do other things on the map. This is why the timing of your freeze is important. Let's say you freeze while dragon is up and your bot and mid lane are both pushing. Chances are, the enemy top laner is going to roam to one of these lanes while you're freezing and have a chance to secure a lead on the opposite side of the map. And since you're freezing, you can't actually answer the roam with your teleport without losing the wave you've frozen. Yes, you have a large individual lead, but it can come at the cost of your team. Even a well-timed freeze can have a negative impact on your team, since it's possible that your teammates just might die to a bad roam. It's best to try and communicate with your team and tell them that your laner is roaming so they don't get caught off guard. On another note, trying to hold a freeze while you're even or behind can sometimes outright lose you the laning phase. This is because if you aren't ahead, it does become a slow push for the enemy laner, which means that your opponent will have an edge in trades due to having a larger wave, and they'll have an opportunity to dive you with the wave you're freezing. I hope people who watch this video understand that freezing is a very powerful tool when used in the right situation. It's not so black and white as freezing is good or freezing is bad. There's cases where it's good and cases where it's bad, and that goes for every other concept in this video. The last concept we're going to be talking about here is fast pushing. This one is probably the easiest to understand. You just kill the waves as fast as possible in order to crash into the enemy turret. You can think of this as the wave manipulation that will give you the most instant gratification. Some champions are better at this than others, than others, and you can see this in the video that Sion is extremely good at it due to his wave clear, even at level 1. In my opinion, there are 3 ways to use fast pushing. You can use it to punish an opponent for leaving lane, whether it's a recall or a roam. Remember that slow pushing is what they want to happen if they leave lane, since they lose the least amounts of minions as possible. However, it's not always possible to push fast enough if you're playing a champ with low wave clear like Camille or Shen. The second way to use fast pushing is to gain priority quickly. For example, let's say that the lane is in a neutral state and both teams are positioning around dragon spawning in like 15 seconds. You'd want to push this lane as fast as possible and get ready to either teleport or run down to dragon to join the inevitable fight. The third way to use fast pushing is in a defensive manner. If the enemy laner is much stronger than you to the point where you can't beat them in a big wave, then you have to try and fast push the wave and get under their turret before they come back from a recall. This way, they cannot freeze on you and the lane will either go into a neutral state or push towards you, allowing you to farm relatively safely. The weaknesses of fast pushing is that it's too hard. Ugh, my talking is so bad. Okay, let's start over. The weaknesses of fast pushing is that it's hard to do much after pushing in a small wave. It's hard to set up a dive and it really doesn't buy you a lot of time to do anything with your priority. I personally think that fast pushing is the simplest and least impactful concept in this video, but it's very important to know when to use. Lastly, we're going to be looking at how we can use everything we've learned in this video on neutral wave states. A neutral wave state is one we're all familiar with since we see it in literally every game at level 1 as you can see in this video. I'd say this is the most interactive wave state since this is the wave state that can be affected most by both players. I say this because any action taken by a player in a neutral state will end up swinging the direction the wave will push. We'll take a look at how we can use the concept of a slow push in this neutral wave state. In this video, you can see how I'm hitting the wave to make sure it'll push towards the enemy side. If I had a lane opponent, they'd be hitting the wave as well or trying to zone me off the wave so I can't get a slow push like this. Slow pushing the wave like this is the best thing you can do in the early levels if you aren't in danger of getting ganked, since this gives you the minion advantage, which in turn gives you the level advantage, and since you're crashing 3 or 4 waves, you gain a lot of priority which you can use to ward, recall, or roam. Most people like to recall here and try to fight when they come back with an item advantage. This is what's called a cheater recall. And I'll speed this up so you guys can see the 3-wave push. This is an important part of the laning phase because people will be trying to fight you for lane control because this is the situation that they want. And just like that, 3-wave crash. Next, we'll be looking at a fast push, which is a crash on the second wave. If my video will ever load. There you go. I personally wouldn't recommend doing this unless you are in danger of getting ganked early. Pushing the waves early and getting it to push back to you this fast does not allow you to play aggressively since the enemy's slow pushing wave will allow them to hit level 3 first with a larger wave. This is only good as a defensive tool as you can wait for the enemy slow push to push towards you so you don't have to worry about getting ganked. So I'll speed this up a little bit. This is kind of scuffed, but it gets the job done. So I push the second wave in, and this is going to this is going to start bouncing back towards me. And lastly, this is another way we can use the concept of the slow push to alter the neutral state of the lane. Basically, what I do here is hold the wave a little bit so that the minions will be positioned more on the enemy's side. This makes it so that the red side minions are reinforced faster, causing a slow push towards me. As you can see. This technique can be useful in 2 situations. It is useful when you want to create an artificial slow push for the purpose of freezing. I wouldn't recommend trying to freeze in the early levels though. If you use this technique in the early levels, it's to try and deny the first 3 minions from the enemy laner if they are late to lane. For example, if you hold the lane while the enemy top laner is late to lane after invading, they'll miss minions and be behind on precious experience. And finally, that's gonna be the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Here's a picture of a Kennen minion, since Kennen is my favorite champion, and this video is all about minions. I hope you learned something, and let me know if you have any critiques, questions, or anything you want to say in the comments. I know that my commentary was not the most cohesive thing in the world, since this is all done in one take. So I did have some slip-ups here and there, but I hope you'll forgive me for that. And hope you guys all have a nice day. Thank you for watching.